welcome. All right, it's Alexander Lawrence, the Portable Infinite, and we're here with Miki Berenyi, and she has a new book, Fingers Crossed: How Music Saved Me from Success. Is it called?
That's right.
And it's been out. It's been out already previously in the UK. It came out this year in the US. Everyone should go buy a couple copies for your whole family, and you know, it's on the Portable Infinite. It's going to be on our best books of the year list at the end of the year. So, you know, it's getting a lot. It's already got a lot of acclaim. Everybody loves this book. Great reviews and stuff. So I mean, let me ask you right off the bat, like, why did you write this book? Did you want to, there was a lot of, did you feel like there was a lot of misinformation about Lush and you wanted to get, straighten it out, you know, with some of these people, what they, you know?
I mean, the honest answer is I was asked to write it.
Well, I know that, but I think, but some of the motivation was it, did you want to like settle the score kind of in a way, or, you know, kind of, because like there's always been a lot of like bullshit about Lush in the press, like over the years. How do you feel? So you're just fulfilling a contract. No, I don't think that's true.
I don't think it would have occurred to me to write a book if I hadn't been asked, and kind of encouraged quite a lot, because I didn't actually think anyone would be interested. But once I kind of thought about it and took the offer seriously, not least because COVID happened, so I was a bit stuck actually. And but I suppose it felt like an opportunity. I don't really have a lot of thought about it. You know, I had to be quite guided through the process. So when Peter at 9/8 kind of said, no, you should write a book, you should write a book, he literally had to tell me how to write, you know, a kind of chapter by chapter synopsis, think about what you want in it. But with the proviso, he said, like, you don't actually have to stick to it, which I didn't. And so I think I didn't really know what the book was going to be until I actually started writing it. I know that sounds a bit pretentious, but it's actually true, because the childhood years just sort of went on and on and on and on, because I actually thought they were more interesting. And I was struggling to get round to writing about the band. Some of that is because, you know, me and Emma and Phil don't talk, or they don't talk to me anyway. So it's kind of difficult territory, because obviously if you've fallen out with people, it's difficult to write objectively about your time together, you know. And I actually didn't want it to be a kind of, you know, how did you put it? Not setting the record straight, but almost the kind of
kind of you know, cleaning up the mess that, you know, that kind of happened, you know, like I mean, I think a lot of rumors, you know, dispelling all the rumors or something and stuff over the years, you know, like a lot of people, you know, kind of like had like ideas about Lush, and, you know, you're kind of like, oh no, this is, you've probably been asked about these questions a bunch of times, and in the past, and so, sometimes in interviews in the 80s, especially when you're a new band, sometimes you're just messing with the interviewer and giving them like goofy answers, just but not now that you're older, you don't have to lie to anybody, or you don't have to make up stories and stuff. But I mean, I think this is, the way you describe it, it's an interesting book. It's interesting to kind of like write when you don't really know how the chapter ends, or the section ends, or how we get to the ending of a book. And I mean, yes, this book is the first half is about your family, then the second half is about the band, and it kind of ends in 96 with Chris's death, and we don't really get you know, the last 20-25 years and the reformation or anything you've done afterwards. It kind of ends with basically with Chris's death and stuff. So I mean, I read a lot of these. I mean, since it's 30, you know, years, there's a lot of bands from the 80s and 90s that are starting to come out with books, and so that's kind of my era, because, you know, I kind of started out in punk, and but I kind of missed the original 70s punk. So So a lot of the bands that I ended up seeing were kind of like the second wave of punk, like bands like Gang of Four and Pill and what they call post punk now. So that was a lot of the bands that I saw. But so I thought it was kind of interesting that for one thing that you kind of half the book's just about your family. So I mean, psychologically, I would say that would mean that you're kind of, the subtext is like the family is really important. It really shapes who you are. There's a whole genetic thing, and then there's like the environment, and you're kind of putting forth a thing like, okay, well, the family is really super important, and even the environmentally, you're surrounded by your parents and your family and stuff. So can you comment on that, like how the family shapes everybody in a way, even like lack of family, I guess, for some people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the books that I often read about that are written by musicians are, I like the formative years. I think they're the interesting bit. It's kind of, and they kind of resonate a bit more true. I think by the time someone's in a band, they're slightly tiptoeing around other band members and, people who they don't want to piss off. And, it can be a little bit tricky being, massively honest about those years. Whereas with childhood stuff, it's the perspective of a child. You're allowed to kind of say what it felt like. It's not, without kind of, I don't know, it's a bit more unfiltered, I suppose. And I think that although so much of it is about my family as well, but it is about that journey of how you end up. People are always like, how did you end up being in a band? I mean, maybe some people are from the start aware that they're going to become a musician from when they're very, very young. I wasn't, it felt quite accidental. And a lot of that was the environment, not particularly of my family, but actually the scene in London at the time and the way that gigs were incredibly cheap and available. And there was a whole kind of substrata of people who kind of shunned the mainstream. And but it was a huge community, and a community that was divided into sort of separate factions. And there was this whole sort of, it's like that kind of, what do you call it, like a psychogeography, you know what I mean? The London that I inhabited and those people inhabited was very separate to the London that, was the 80s and Thatcher's Britain in a kind of, city boys and I think, that kind of divided, the rich, it's not even rich and poor, it's just one life and another, and I was thinking even like, I remember when like Live Aid happened. Now, when, people look back and they go, oh, Live Aid, this huge global event and everyone was involved. I didn't know a single person who fucking watched it because they just weren't interested. They were probably down at some pub gig that night, jumping around some band that's completely long been forgotten about. And I think it was that as much as whatever family, that fascinated me. This is how people get sucked into a lifestyle that maybe is just wouldn't have been predicted, like, even 5 years earlier when they were like at school. So it's as much about that scene as well. And funnily enough, I think, I mean, what age are you?
I'm
You're
60.
probably
I'm three
okay.
years old. I'm 3 years older.
Right. Because it's funny how that period, like I remember getting into like the Gang of Four and Pill and all of those things, but retrospectively,
Yeah.
because just those 3 years make such a huge difference,
Yeah,
And
yeah. Like I was into Ramones and Patti Smith and the Sex Pistols, but I just listened to the records. I didn't really go to gigs or something like back then when I was like when I was like 11 and 12 and stuff. I didn't really go to gigs till I was maybe 15 and stuff. But like
same
you,
here, but I think I got into things like the Ramones, not because I was so knowledgeable, but because they were literally playing at the Lyceum. They played like 4 nights or something, and I went to 3 of them, and they were amazing. And, you could get into a band by going to see them live in London. I think that was quite magical, actually, because it was totally affordable. You didn't have to buy the tickets 6 months in advance because it was going to sell out, and it was, I saw the Cramps and, Gun Club and all of these bands that were, hugely influential. But I didn't really know them on record till I went to see them.
Right. Yeah, I think how you're describing getting into Lush and bands, I think that was like a leftover from punk rock, was people, just people that were there, they were people were looking for somebody to be in a band, just it wasn't really about where, like the prog rock days. I mean, you had to have the ability to play, and like years of music training. And then I think the punk and post punk and what came after, I think just people were looking for somebody that just fit the part. It's like, okay, well, hey, you should be in a band. you know I, I can't play, I don't care, you can play bass or something. And I think that's
Well,
more the spirit of the times, I think.
oh, for sure, for sure. And I think I'm just going to look something up because that was it, Marco Portia. I don't know if you've seen. There's a film that this guy Marco Portia has made about a band called Rema Rema, who are on 4AD. And I went to see a screening of it about a month ago. And you'd love it because the whole first section, I mean, Rema Rema only like released one EP, I think, but the whole sort of first section is exactly mapping that post-punk world. And there's a whole bit about bass players and people, like how many bass players they were who started these bands. And I think John Robb was kind of going, well, the bass it's only got 4 strings, so that's already easier, but it's also can like play melody. And I thought, God, you're so right. There were so many of those bands, whether it was like Joy Division or Cure, all of these bands that actually there's a sort of really melodic bass, and from people who don't really know how to play brilliantly, right? In the kind of, like you say, the prog rock sense, where they're, incredible musicianship, they're kind of learning as they go along. But it was a really good observation.
So yeah, I'm reading this book, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, right now. And I this is the third time I've went through it, and I totally forgot about, like, Austria. Like 100 years ago, Austria and Hungary used to be like one country. It was it's almost like the last um aristocratic state, where, and at that time in Europe, Austro-Hungary and Germany and Russia were like the biggest states, or what do you call them? I don't know, countries.
Empires, really.
It was like an empire and stuff, and it was like, and that one was way more. I mean, way more aristocratic. Even right now, I think, king and queens. It's almost like a decorative. But they actually had the king or queen ruling both countries and stuff. And so how do you think that fits into your family? I mean, were they kind of like leftovers from this aristocratic reign, or did they ever tell you about that, or what it was like? Because it seemed like that was like the last chance like an aristocratic. Oh, aristocrats are going to save the world. They're going to save this country. I think that was the last, and ever since then, it's either been, capitalism, socialism, or democracies, or dictatorships too. But that was like the last time, like, they thought they gave it over to the aristocrats to be the government for the country and stuff. In that, and your grandmother was part of that. So, well, how does that whole figure into your background? I'm just wondering.
I mean, I'm not totally sure. My dad used to sort of say, there's a kind of very lazy way of saying that any Hungarian name that has a YI at the end is like, it's like the von whatever, or the de in French, or the whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's seen as a sort of indication of some sort of class background. But my dad was always very scornful of that. And what he had this phrase that was called seven plum tree nobility. I think it might come from Chekhov or something, but he said it's, to him, it always felt like, well, it's not, there's the Esterházys and there's the kind of, these grand old families from Hungary or whatever, there's a lot of kind of minor bourgeoisie who like to sort of have pretensions to it. And certainly, I think what was quite funny was in the 70s, the number of people I knew who would almost pretend to have Hungarian heritage, because you could kind of get away with saying, oh yes, my father was a Hungarian count, right? And no one would fucking check, right? So you could have this sort of exotic veneer of some sort of, yes, some dusty old aristocratic kind of mantle. So I don't really know a whole lot about it, I'll be honest. I do think that there was, I mean, I'm not being funny, but in Britain, there was that. I found that at Queen's College, again, there's a sort of very quite rigid class system in Britain as well, that it feels kind of like it's not that big a deal. But when you go to a private school and you're suddenly mingling with, certain people who literally have like stately homes, you realize that it is still thriving, and there's, and in those sort of schools it counts for a lot, so
I mean, from reading the book, I mean, you were living in London. You went to, not only did you go to Japan, you went to Hungary. You lived in California because your mom was an actress. She moved to California when you were really young. And I didn't make it in the book, but you went to Magic Mountain and saw Gang of Four here, and I was at that gig, and you had one of those Kodak cameras with the squarish light bulbs and stuff. And
well,
I
it
had,
was actually the camera with the tower of flashing.
yeah, the snap on. Yeah, you snap it
Yeah.
on. It's like it was almost like fireworks for the thing. And I had the same camera. I had the same camera at that gig, and I'm taking pictures too. I'm almost like in the same row as you from your looking at your pictures. But and I went to both gigs. They played like two gigs and stuff, and you probably didn't really stay for the whole thing, but there was like they played one gig and then they took a break and then they played a second one. And
Oh, I wasn't aware, because I was probably, how old would I have
I
been?
think
What
we were
year?
14 or something. Or
Yeah,
no, or seven. I don't know. No, wait a minute. It was
I was
in,
probably about,
I think
I
it was
think
in 82. So what's that,
yeah, so
15?
I was 15.
Okay.
So, and I think I didn't know they were playing. I'd gone to Magic Mountain to go to Magic Mountain,
Oh,
which is
oh,
what a
I see. I see.
15-year-old. So it was only when I was walking past what is exactly that Spinal Tap puppet show and Spinal Tap
Right.
kind of display. It was like, bloody hell, the Gang of Four are playing. So I just went in, and so I wouldn't have known about a second set, because I probably had a parent picking me up from the gates at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah, I mean, in that time, I mean, because I missed the punk thing. I mean, the Gang of Four was one of the best live bands of them, and Public Image, and there was some other interesting bands like you mentioned, the Cramps and Gun Club. They were kind of like really great. I mean, because punk rock was sort of really, oh yeah, we're going to be real serious and real negative, and then that became like no fun after a while. And then there was all these bands that were really kind of putting on a show and jumping around, and it was way more fun. And yeah, Gang of Four. But you were over here in California. Like, what was your first impressions of coming over to California and hanging out, and there was differences from your previous London life? Did you like it?
I mean, I never lived there, so I only came for holidays.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I would, I mean, it's difficult because it was kind of bound up with my stepdad, who I didn't get on with, and who had a very sort of, he was very wowed by the kind of Hollywood lifestyle, and, having an agent who lived in Beverly Hills, and, he was totally into that. And to me, um, he would be very fake around that. I didn't like it. And also the difficulty I had with coming to California, as much as I loved Magic Mountain, as much as I loved going to the beach, there was sort of, the food was amazing, to someone from Britain, America was like this kind of dazzling sort of sweet shop full of goodies, But I think on the negative side, I mean, you couldn't walk anywhere. You had to be driven. In London, I could go to gigs when I was like 15, you know, and they would check your ID in America, and you can't get in till you're 21. I thought that's insane. You can't drink.
Mhm.
You couldn't. There was no real independence, you know.
Yeah, people would get kids would get around that thing, like all those things. But I think now, and then you're also the distances. You have to basically pick like a neighborhood, like west or east or north or south or whatever, and then stick to that neighborhood. I mean, I think more people kind of gravitate towards Fairfax and Melrose because it's like central and the Grove is right there and you can just walk around there and stuff. So that's like people, oh, you live in Van Nuys, I'll see you later. I'm not going to come visit you because you're too far away. I mean, that's how you can't really go to all these different places because it's like you're just like stuck in traffic in LA. So let's see what else. Okay, so there was a story about you coming to the Odyssey because it was like an all ages club and losing your virginity and stuff. And so I was reading like you're doing this interview with Moon Zappa coming up, and she did the same thing. She went over to London and just met some random guy and lost her virginity. But when you go to a different country, does it really count? Is it like kind of like because you're going to a different country and it's like, and then you go back to your friends back in England and it's like they go, oh yeah, I did it. And it's like, oh yeah, sure, right. Yeah, I don't believe you. So like, does it really count when you do it that way? Or is it's because like sometimes your friends aren't going to believe it actually happened.
I mean, I think that probably boys brag more about that and need the validation more. I don't think, with as a girl doing something like that, you run the risk of everyone going very quiet on you, and disapproving. So I I think that for most girls that I would know of, the reasons would be completely personal, like it's something that you just have to get through. And I felt that, lots of, I mean, I think it's not an unusual thing for it being a holiday thing. Plenty of people, I think, have, had their first time in those circumstances because there's no baggage really. It's not like being at school where everybody knows who you are and everyone's going to talk about who you slept with or what you did or whatever. You go away and you're kind of free of all that, and so it doesn't surprise me that that thing happens. I mean, funny enough, with Moon Unit, I'm actually doing an interview with her in a couple of weeks
Right.
about her book in a kind of event. And when I was reading the book, I did think, oh my God, there were so many things that really resonated, even though the details of our circumstances are completely different. But yeah, it's,
I, I
I
think
mean, she's
yeah,
the same age as me as well. So,
and comparing you to Moon Unit, I mean, like, I mean, her father was such a big figure on the music scene in the 60s and 70s, and it seemed like she didn't really like she kind of sided with her mother, and she was kind of like with her mother against Frank, because like he was in other relationships, like during they were married um like the whole pretty much the whole time until his death, and he had affairs the whole time. And then when he died, that's when she kind of like it was like she got married, she had a kid. It was like once she can like have a life. Once he died, it was like he's no longer there, so you can like okay, now I can get married, have a kid, do be normal. Was it in your case? I mean, you grew up kind of in this crazy atmosphere. The band kind of took over because I was just kind of a crazy environment. But once the band ended, you seem like that's when you started your family life. Like you couldn't have done that during the band, or you think like the family life kind of came after the band. Like okay, I want to live a more normal life. I want to like okay, kids, family, like live in one place.
I
Like,
mean, I think part of the difficulty of having family life, and I think it is particularly for women, I met lots of blokes who had, you know, kids and blah, 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 and they would go on tour and, and they, not that they were misbehaving or anything, they might be very loving fathers. I think for a woman, it's so much harder because physically you are the person who is, bearing that child for a start. And there is, you know, I don't know, real practicalities like breastfeeding and blah, 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 and, you know, and having to be around. And I do think that it's still more socially unacceptable, you know, to be the one who abandons your children to go on tour, leaving someone else to look after them. And I think that you know, even as a mother, you feel that, like, it's a hard thing to sort of, you know, feel even okay about yourself, you know, to do that. Now, I've seen bands, female, you know, musicians who might take their children on tour with them, and there are bands that will accommodate them. I'm not sure that Lush would have, and certainly the amount we toured. And again, you know, because I grew up so rootlessly and constantly around adults, it's not something that I think is very good for children. You know, gigs are an adult environment, and dragging some kid around, you know, from pillar to post, I think it's just not really right for them. So I think on a practical level, trying to maintain a band that is touring and all of that, I'm not sure I could have done it. There are people who have and can, but I think it would have made me incredibly stressed and quite miserable.
Yeah, I guess that was more like Moon's experience, where she did go on a couple tours like later. Like when Lush got back together in 2015, and was that your children had grown up by then, or and it was like, okay, now I can go on tour? You waited till the children to grow up a little bit, I guess.
I mean, a little bit. They were still little, but you know, my partner Moose kind of, you know, took on, you know, a fair bit more. I mean, we've always completely co-parented, and also, you know, it wasn't really like I still had my day job, so you know, I took my holidays and I had some sort of sabbatical from the job, but we weren't, you know, the longest we went away was about two separate kind of 3.5 week sections in the spring and in the autumn, which is fine, you know what I mean? But there's absolutely no way that I could have done like a sort of 6 month tour or something. So, you know, for those sort of short stints away, I mean, even in Britain, we played a handful of gigs, a few kind of festivals in Europe. So that was always quite controllable. You know, it would be just a few days away, really.
And the Lush reunion was a good experience, or it was, you know, in 2015 or 16, or you wish you should have just went into your other bands or something? What do you think?
I mean, I don't think I would have done the other bands if I hadn't done the reunion. You know, I think that, you know, there was a big falling out, and there has been, you know, a lot of kind of bad blood ever since. But on the positive side, you know, I hadn't been in a band I hadn't done anything after Lush musically. You know, Chris died. I had absolutely no interest in going back into that world. So when I did do it, um, you know, it almost surprised me how much I enjoyed actually playing music and being back doing that and touring and being on stage. All of it was immense fun. So I think that after it kind of ended, you know, I do credit that reunion with the formation of the sort of subsequent bands and me actually having come back into music. I don't think I would have done it without it, actually.
Well, getting back to your dad, I mean, there was the story about you going with your dad into bars and helping them pick up chicks and stuff. Do you think does that work? Is that like a male thing? Can women kind of do that? Like, it's like, oh, here's my kid, you know, let's go. You know, it seemed like a man could do it, whether he has like maybe a son or a daughter, and then you know, but it doesn't seem like women can do that. Women can't go in a bar with their kid and, like, you know, like use them as kind of an enabler or whatever.
I mean, I would question whether it's a great idea to do it even if you're a man,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know if it worked, but so I mean, you played Piroshka, MB3 has been going on for a while. You've done tours with Wedding Present, with Lowell Tolhurst and Budgie. There've been
and Gang of Four.
Oh, you did a tour with Gang of Four. That was other band too. Okay, here we go. Got the first album there. Yeah, I forgot about the Gang of Four and probably some other. You probably played with plenty of bands. And you still got some more dates coming up in October, and then there's more dates in next year. So it's still happening.
And
Oh,
then there'll be an album. So an album is we just finished kind of mastering it.
oh,
So there'll
good.
be
Okay, so
an
we're
album next year.
check it out, and then you're gonna come back to the United States at some point too, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
I was at the LA show, and I think your some of your family was there, right?
My mother was there, yes.
Oh, okay. And I wanted to ask you what are your children? What kind of music are they into?
Oh my God, you'd have to ask them. That it's that parent thing where if I say something, it will be a band that they liked 6 months ago and now are like, deeply cringe about. So I'm not even going to go there because I'll say something wrong.
Okay, so I mean, because of Spotify, I mean, people have like, I guess that's why kind of Lush have kind of had a second life because people have found them on Spotify. But I mean, um, but if you look at Lush, I mean, their most popular songs are "For Love" and "Lady Killers." A lot of your songs are like the most popular songs now. But that, I mean, Emma was more the main songwriter in the early days and stuff. Isn't it? Do you feel it's kind of weird that you get so much attention on Spotify now, and like especially for Love is like one of the key songs now, where maybe it wasn't so much, 30 years ago.
They were both singles. And I think if you go on like a different format, if you look on Apple Music or something, I think it might be Deluxe that's the top one. I'm not sure. But
Okay.
they were all singles, and Sweetness and Light and Desire Lines, I think, was covered by someone. So I don't know. I mean, I'm never quite sure about those sort of algorithms and God knows what. Who knows how they work? I think sometimes you just end up on some sort of playlist and that shoves it to the top somehow.
Yeah. So you said that there's going to be a record, more touring. I mean, this book ends in basically in '96. With there's a few other things that happened afterwards, like some deaths and stuff. But is there going to be a second book, kind of from 2016 onward, like what to get us up to date here? Like the Mickey story.
Well, I think my publisher would be very keen for that to happen.
Because
Bless him.
I mean, because like I said, I mean you had this whole family life, and like, and you kind of I mean the band years, I mean I don't know, the band was together like 10 years in the or so 8 years in the original, but since you spent so much time together, it might have seemed like 30 years, with those people, and so it's like it's hard to have a fresh because you spent so much time with those people in those days, and there was no distractions from the internet or whatever. You guys had to like entertain each other's, and so you kind of you're used to your shtick or your gimmicks and stuff, and it's like, okay, well, these guys again, okay, I think I know their story. And it's like what happened, what happened to Mickey after after you took a break, after like '98, when I guess the band broke up officially in '98. So there was, you had a family, you start working a normal job, you had your kids, you got together with Moose, and you're in North London. You're still in Willesden or around that area.
I'm up the road. I'm up the road. Yeah, not far.
How far from the from
Like
the, from the old
like a
house?
10-minute bus ride.
So okay, well, let's see, we're running out of time. So yeah, everyone, okay, so everyone should read fingers crossed, Miki Berenyi's book. Buy it on Amazon, buy it at your independent bookstore. It's around. We got the MB3 record. Is it going to be your own label, or what's going
No,
on?
it'll be on Bella Union.
Oh, okay, Bella. That was the other records were on, the other solo records were on. So
Yeah,
is that Simon or is that the other guy?
it is Simon.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my friend, I had a couple friends that were on Bella Union over there and stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty good label, and he always does like he always has a lot of record events like in London, like where they have a market and stuff like that, and stuff. So and then so you're gonna I guess you're gonna do this Moon Zappa. You've read the book? You're looking forward to that?
Yes, I've had a couple of email exchanges. She seems absolutely delightful, so I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Okay, so we've been going for about half an hour here. Thank you for talking to me. I had to reread the book this week, because I thought we were going to do this interview a couple months ago, but thank you for talking to me. Thanks